Individuals and fan bases don't think the same things. You and me as individuals will sometimes have different tastes from what the fanbase says. This is normal. So today I will respectfully explain why my video game preferences will sometimes overrule the majority. Here we go with the unpopular opinions. I do enjoy the original Legend of Zelda about 90% of the time, but one of the big things that bugs me is the outdated combat system. Most of the time this works well, but all Link does is jab with the sword instead of swipe it like his later games do, and he moves in a grid-like tanky fashion, making encounters with Dark Nuts and Wizrobes tedious to get through. While I agree that it's the thrill of secret searching that defines this game, in my opinion this can easily backfire badly for players who want more of a structure that later generation video games offer that more gamers are used to. This is where I think the game is outdated the most. Not knowing where to go does make video game players uncomfortable. I don't like the health system in this game. I have heard Zelda players say that hearts are abundant. I highly disagree. I always found it tough to restore my hearts from enemy drops, so I backtrack to a fairy fountain often, especially in dying from dungeons because you restart with only 3 hearts, which isn't helpful for the later dungeons. I do not like to gamble with the rupee minigames. I hear countless stories of how Zelda players make it big with these games, but I get so damn unlucky I avoid them entirely. Yes, I would rather rupee farm or burn secret bushes for rupee rewards rather than do these. I think what ticks me off about this game is that how obscure some equipment is to find and need for a first time player. For example, I rage quitted at Dungeon 6 on my first proper playthrough because I didn't have the blue ring on me, but it wasn't until I bought a strategy guide that I realized I needed it and where it was. This goes for the bait as well. When you get a game over, you start back at the beginning location. I personally don't think this is as bad as Zelda fans say because this is the smallest game world, and the game gives you shortcuts to get back to where you were at really quick. I prefer Zelda 2 way over Zelda 1. This is because I'm way more accustomed to side scrollers and twitch reflexes with the sword over top-down games in general. Plus I just have way more fun with platformers. While I do enjoy casual or easier games like other Zelda games, I really do, I also find an amazing respect for unforgiving games because I don't picture a dangerous adventure involves having things just handed to you left and right. Just like Dark Souls, I appreciate a game that puts your body on edge for every challenge that comes to immerse you in deep. Death Mountain is a difficulty spike, but when Zelda players say they get lost in this place, I disagree. Why? Go right the whole time. No, I'm dead serious. It's that simple. Look it up. Now, while Zelda 2 is picked on for being the side-scroller for the series, here's the one big part I disagree with. Every Zelda game is similar and different. They're all similar in being explorative, dungeons, and items. It's the structure of Zelda. Does Zelda 2 fit this? Sure. So, in my opinion, Zelda 2 has its right to be different with its execution just like every other Zelda game out there. A Link to the Past is wonderful and revolutionary in a lot of things, but I think the dungeon design is one of the weakest in the series. They all look too similar with common things like pillars, pits, switches, pots, and wall designs, but there is one exception, which is... I actually love the Ice Palace a lot. It's my favorite dungeon in A Link to the Past. The strong color palette change, the many floors concept, and I adore A Link to the Past for its difficulty. So I love the added challenge of adapting to the ice physics. Fun dungeon. I don't like Turtle Rock at all. This is because it messes with my bad navigation psyche and makes me feel helpless with the platform because it forces me to go in specific directions. This makes me feel really insecure because I don't control which rooms I go to. No, I'm serious. It's a real immersion smasher and makes me dead uncomfortable. Oh, here's a fun one. I've heard a lot of Zelda players say that A Link to the Past is a comfortable experience for everyone. I have to disagree. I've known plenty of Zelda players that have had trouble coping with the difficulty and controls of this game and end up not getting into it. That because of Super Nintendo nostalgia excuse, no, won't work. I'm sorry, but I don't have nostalgia goggles for A Link to the Past. I didn't grow up with the Super Nintendo. It's a really fun game, don't get me wrong, but I wouldn't consider this game close to one of the best games ever made. It's also a Zelda game I don't replay often either. I haven't played this game in 12 years. I will for the remastered top 20 Zelda games though. While Link's Awakening has a touching story, it's not something I highly value from this game because 2D Zelda games focus way less on storytelling and way more on gameplay. So the story doesn't really affect my overall rating for this game. I really don't care about the mediocre bosses in this game at all, like the anglerfish. This is because I believe there's a difference between harmless and aggravating bosses. I meant harmless bosses all around Mario, Sonic, and Zelda, so no, I don't consider them annoying at all because they're harmless like many other Zelda bosses. Sue me. I adore the ending, but there's one thing I disagree with. Many Zelda players say that Marin and the others shouldn't disappear because of sentimental value, but remember that it is a dream and that the real Link is in danger from being stranded out in the water. So in my opinion, it is good he woke up to survive. Think about it, the bosses were encouraging Link to fall for that sentimental value so that the evil can live on in the dream world. Now, Link's Awakening is the first to set up the trend that you can modify both the B and A buttons for the sword and other items. I've heard plenty of Zelda fans comment that this is a huge pace breaker because you do have to pause often to change items. True, but I would argue that all Zelda games pause often to change items, so I don't see it a problem here personally. But that's just me, can't speak for anyone else. Now, I've heard plenty say that the Eagle's Tower is the best and that the Face Shrine is the worst. What? I'm the opposite. I love the Face Shrine's music, color palette, and mystery aspects. While I adore the puzzles from Eagle's Tower, the music and atmosphere is kind of really boring. But I will admit that Turtle Rock is a whole lot worse than the Eagle's Tower. I actually don't mind Caborca Bora. I thought he was an outstanding help playing this game the first time since strategy guides weren't the rage back then. Sure, he hasn't aged well because veteran Ocarina of Time players will insist they don't need his help anymore, and the internet gives us answers, but I like him. I think he's really cool. I found out recently that Lord Jabu Jabu's belly is now the bad dungeon in Ocarina of Time. One, it looks displeasing, at which to each their own. I think it looks cool in original. And two, because of Rudo's manners, at which I disagree. Mido and Daryunia have disrespected Link before this, so why is it a sudden problem with Rudo? Also, I think the hatred for carrying her is not deserved. I think the positives in this escort mission outweigh the negatives. About the Megaton Hammer being situational and picked on, I highly disagree. Because the Megaton Hammer is optional, you can skip the Fire Temple to head for the Water Temple first. In my opinion, having the cost of a situational item for an added layer of non-linearity in Ocarina of Time is a fantastic idea. Look at Link Between Worlds. Because each item is entirely situational to their own dungeon, you can enter any dungeon you want. I don't value Kakariko Village, Gerudo Valley, or Soraya's Song as memorable tracks. They're good songs, sure, but they don't really pop to me like to other Zelda players. Sorry, wish I could tell my ears what to adore. Now, remember that I played Ocarina of Time several times, around 10 or so times, so my nostalgia goggles are shredded. That being said, I still think Ocarina of Time is still a great video game nowadays, but as the years go on, I can see how more gamers are seeing that the game hasn't been aging gracefully. I've never considered Ocarina of Time close to one of the greatest video games of all time in my life. I'm disappointed with the Water Temple this time around. I know a lot of Zelda players call it refreshing with its easier difficulty, but there's a big piece of me that went missing going through it. I don't know, I guess there's this sad, sadistic side of me that kind of appreciated the former difficulty the dungeon once had. I'm weird. The bottom of the well. There was a time I had a lot of trouble with it along with a few other YouTubers. But if you think about the rule of Master Quest with doors being opened when targets are hit in the same room, it's not a hard dungeon at all. I admit I exaggerated how bad it was, but this is Master Quest. Every dungeon will stump you for a while. I still like the Forest Temple from Ocarina of Time, it just so happens to be my least favorite. However, it's when I played Master Quest that I realized what it was missing. Good puzzles. Now remember, I played Ocarina of Time several times, so I'm tired of those same old puzzles. So if this version cheered up my respect for the temple, that's a plus in my books. Some Zelda players define this game as hard mode. I call it an inconsistent mess in a good way. That's because it's completely random at which puzzles you'll catch on to faster or slower than other Zelda players. Difficulty isn't really this game's point in my opinion. It's more about your abstract thinking skills the game wants to test you on. I think when it comes to the absurd amount of trolling in this game, I prefer Ocarina of Time more. However, when it comes to Golden Skulltula hunting, I prefer Master Quest. The reason I think this is unpopular is the same reason I like Oracle of Ages. It could be perceived as being a rather tedious experience in exploration to the common Zelda player. The Great Bay Temple is one of my top favorite 3D Zelda dungeons to date. This is because it sparks my Oracle of Ages love, making me appreciate the complex puzzle mechanics that work here. Plus, I love water and the Zora suit is my favorite. This one will get some comments going. I don't like the iconic canyon segment of the game at all. I'm sorry, I don't like the insane amount of backtracking with the well and Goron Keg. Climbing to the Stone Tower Temple felt really repetitious to me with the Elegy of Emptiness, and the Stone Tower Temple honestly felt like a really bland temple. The aesthetic just isn't my thing, sadly. I'm not a fan of the time limit in Majora's Mask. This is because I associate it subconsciously with work or school, so when Majora's Mask says, "Meet me here at 8 o'clock on the third day," it reminds me of gotta turn in the school assignment online by midnight. I'm sorry, but I'm not a fan of punctual obligations in video games. I like doing things on my own time. I don't like the execution of the side quests in this game. I prefer side quests that have a permanent fix to the problem. With Majora's Mask, the problem gets the band-aid torn off after you restart the clock. Knowing I save Romani one time and then she'll get kidnapped the next 15 times because I'm helping someone else is not a happy thought. That breaks my heart as a Zelda player that I can't help her for good. And lastly, I'm not into apocalyptic or horror games in general. Well, first, everyone has genres they're not fond of. And second, I'm a hardcore action gamer, so feelings of apprehension and dread that immerse other Zelda players into this experience is not something I feel from video games. It's just not my kind of game, and never has been. Now, Oracle of Seasons does have a slow pace starting out with the first two dungeons, but in my opinion, the bosses, items, and dungeons are magnificent after that. I'm guessing this turned off a lot of Zelda players because Chide109 and owners of Triforce are the only YouTubers and Zelda players I know that can describe this game as thoroughly and praiseworthy as I can. We are a rare breed of Zelda players. Now, there are some who say that Link's Awakening is comparable to Oracle of Seasons and Ages. In some graphics and control aspects, sure, but technology-wise, the Oracle games were made in the Game Boy line after Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. In my opinion, I think Link's Awakening are leagues different from the Oracle games. Now, I'm really curious to see if anyone noticed this because I never see anyone bring it up. I think the overworld is fantastic, but there's one crippling flaw with it in my opinion in both Holodrum and Subrosia. It's too spaced apart from one landscape to the next. Unfortunately, this makes Oracle of Seasons, in my opinion, a very empty feeling of an overworld in these spacious areas. Any Oracle of Seasons players? Leave me a comment, I want to know. Now, I've heard some Zelda fans say that Oracle of Seasons does fan service to Zelda 1 in some respects to the point where it feels ripped off. True, the first two dungeons for their locations and bosses are taken, and there are puzzles that pay homage to a couple of Zelda 1 tropes like bombable secret rooms, but otherwise, I don't agree with that comment enough to take it seriously. I think Oracle of Seasons is my favorite Zelda game for genuinely taking me off guard with how awesome its music was when I first played it compared to any other Zelda game. I think that's what is so cool about the Oracle games is the amount of ambition they put into the different areas of these two games, especially with them being Game Boy Color games. Now this one is interesting. Some Zelda players I come across have problems with the Goron dance to get the 2 keys for the 6th dungeon. I'm talking rage quitting bad. Really? I'm just surprised. I didn't think twice about it personally. That is weird. The mermaid suit is the best executed water item in the series in my opinion. How it's mapped to the D-pad instead of the buttons makes traversing the water as smooth as butter in terms of sensitivity. And since I like water, you bet I favor it over a lot of other items. Speaking of items, I actually don't like the seed shooter at all. That's because it takes forever to change directions to fire and there's a lag time to use it again if you miss. hits, especially with the ricochets. Other Zelda players prefer this over the slingshot from Oracle of Seasons. Nope. The curse of the ricochet lag time is too great for me. Now I've heard the Rod of Seasons and Harp of Ages as being lame gimmicky items, but think about how much that contradicts A Link to the Past. If both the Harp of Ages and Magic Mirror take you to another version of the same world, then in my opinion, that's not an argument I'd get behind. If you had more reasons, sure, but not by those terms alone. Now, I want to address this since Oracle of Ages is the puzzle monster Zelda game. I've heard some Zelda players argue that puzzles define a good Zelda game. I'd argue back and say this game proves that that isn't the case. Think about it, do Zelda players praise Wind Waker because of the puzzles, or because the sailing is the biggest factor for its enjoyment? Puzzles account for one paint color, true, but it doesn't paint the whole picture. You know, despite that Force Horde was only an hour long, I did enjoy a good amount of it because of its diverse environments. I think the only boring level, in my opinion, was the Sea of Trees, the first level, but otherwise, it did stand out for the short time I played it. Personally, I'm grateful that Force Hordes does exist despite that many Zelda players rank it low or doesn't consider it influential. The game obviously has some influence to Minishcap, Force Hordes Adventures, and Triforce Heroes existing, so no, I disagree. I think Force Hordes should not be put under the rug and forgotten about with its impact. Experiments can go a long way in bringing us great games in the end. It's short titles like Force Hordes that make me question if I'm a little too obsessed with Zelda for my own good. I mean, think about it. I blew a minigame that lasts only an hour long and compare them to the main series games out of proportion. This is like taking the Pokemon Stadium minigames and comparing them to the regular Pokemon games. Yeah, that is a weird circumstance. The Rupee Fever jingle is one of my favorite Zelda tunes of all time. Trust me, you will not find 5% who will agree with me about this. It was the biggest track that took Zelda players by surprise in demonstrating my top 10 favorite Legend of Zelda songs a while back. Now this one will blow your socks up, but I think my time was more well spent playing the CDI games over Force Hordes. This is because I find a fascination with faulty games. I always love studying what makes good and bad games. It's a novel writing habit. Since Force Hordes was only an hour long, gotta say I took less away from this game than the CDI games. Oh god, I'm going to die, aren't I? I don't mean anything upfront in saying that boats aren't my thing. I've never been a fan of them in real life or appreciating the ocean. Remember when I said that I like Zelda for its many environments? So it's hard for me to get immersed into the ocean because it's one environment and I want to see more. So really, it's nothing personal. I can't explain why this happens, but it just does. But my ears are sensitive to some high pitches this game has that makes me mute the TV, such as Dragon Roost Island, the mini boss fight, the high chimes in the Forbidden Woods music, and the worst of it is Muldira's theme with its rapid fire high pitched flute music. I wish I was making this up, but this is real. Next, let's talk about the cell shading. It looks great in dark dungeons, and the HD remake makes the game a lot more enjoyable for me to look at. However, let me put it this way, that it's not one of my favorite art styles out there. There's really no explanation for it. Everyone naturally likes more art styles than others, and this one, not the best for me. Sorry. The endgame wasn't well executed in my opinion. I think the Triforce shards are fine because it represents Wind Waker and the ocean concept really well, but the slog of the rupee farming, the repeating bosses dungeon, and the rewards of getting to the final boss isn't worth it. I like the Puppet Ganon fight, but that's about it. I love the Wind Temple. Even with Makar there, the fittingly strange ambient music, and the difficulty of the dungeon, I still had a blast with that last dungeon. You won't find many Wind Waker players agreeing to that because it has the water temple conundrum and having several floors with several ways to go. Force Hordes Adventures focuses on item congregations, where players can pick up items they like. These are often frowned upon because you need to backtrack to these if you get the wrong item to progress. I disagree with this because I would rather that Zelda players had the freedom to choose items rather than being assigned items. I personally think the replayability will suffer if the answers are just given to you. Many Zelda players complain that Force Hordes Adventures should have been non-linear and puzzle challenging like the other games. No, I absolutely disagree with with this. Village of the Blue Maiden proves to me that putting in figuring out puzzles in a party or fast-paced game diarrheas on the pacing. Just look at the Great Maze from Super Smash Bros. Brawl. No, more pacey, less thinky. This is the party game slogan. I personally think Force Horde's Adventures is the most helpful game in the Zelda library when it comes to understanding our Zelda preferences. This is why I recommend Force Horde's Adventures to Zelda players, is because of the strong contrast to the Zelda formula. And because of this, I see Zelda players appreciate the other Zelda games more. I like Force Horde's Adventures a lot more than the usual Zelda player. It's because it's something I've done all my life with video games. If a game isn't faithful to what this series does, then my brain switches off comparing the game to others in the series and starts looking for what makes it a fun game in its own right. So, is this game fun as a top-down beat-em-up adventure? Absolutely. So I said that I play Zelda for the large amounts of environments. I've criticized the lack of this from Wind Waker, so why not from Force Horde's Adventures and Triforce Heroes? Because they're action-oriented games compared to the other games. So my brain switches from appreciating the environment to the bloodbath mentality from me playing action games. Give me good environments or good action and I'm good. Minishcap is a fun Zelda game, but it's the worst Zelda game in my opinion for teasing you on where to go next for your first time. There have been multiple times where I search the entire map and wander off aimlessly for a long while, and then I look up a strategy guide and feel like an idiot. Ugh, I hate those moments. I don't understand the novelty behind the Kinstone pieces. I think it's an oversaturated gimmick. Now, I get the appeal to put them together to open up areas, but there's so many pieces it forces on you to collect that it's distracting. It kind of gets on my nerves when every item or treasure chest is Kinstone piece this and Kinstone piece that. Ezlo is the least memorable Zelda companion to me in my opinion. I don't know, he just doesn't say anything that gets my attention personality wise, and he becomes invisible being Link's hat 90% of the time. So most of the time I just forget he's there. If it's any consolation, I did tear up when he unexpectedly left at the end though. I'm actually not bothered with Minish Cap having only 5 dungeons. That's because the Minish Cap item can be easy for it to overstay its welcome. It was fun, but after 5 dungeons and a lot of exploring with the cap, I was happy and satisfied with the length of the game being as long as it was. Not too long, not too short. Just right. Now, I like or don't mind every dungeon in the Zelda series, or I can get through them all just fine, but I despise the Palace of Winds, and it's the only dungeon I rage quit from in the series. This dungeon pisses me off because of its overpowering quarter-like feel, ridiculous length, and super repetitive nature. Oh, and the music is horrible. I actually don't mind hunting down the bugs in the Twilight Realm as Wolf Link. Well, first, I like the daunting atmosphere, and second, I just associated it with the harmless exploration that Zelda always does. Just like finding the cuckoos in Kakariko Village from Ocarina of Time. I don't know, couldn't tell you how the majority of Zelda players found it a chore, while I was alright with it. Now, I've heard some make fun of the plot from Twilight Princess because the innocent victims are plowed into the Twilight Realm without knowing what is going on, so what's the threat here to them? How to get around this? I don't care. I care about characters, but I've seen so many nonsensical stories in video games it doesn't bother me. In my opinion, video games are supposed to be fun, not to make sense. I'm not a fan of Midna's Lament. I used to be when I got into this game the first couple of times, but in my opinion for my side, this song ages worse and worse every time I go back to replay Twilight Princess. Today I find it distracting. I'm bad with describing music, so my best guess is to say that the accompanying high key notes of the piano don't really mesh well with the set of low key notes. I'm not a fan of the Twilight Princess HD remake, despite that the original is my favorite 3D Zelda game. The graphics to me actually don't look too different, and the original is still a rather recent game in my opinion, that it didn't need a remake. No, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and Wind Waker did their HD remakes with 100 times more justice than this one. The slow start is actually one of my highlights for me in Twilight Princess. This is because I prefer character establishment in my video games. So yes, shoot me for wanting to know more about Link before his adventure begins. I enjoyed the goat herding, the slingshot tutorial, the kids that look up to him as a role model. I'll take this sacrifice to gameplay to know my characters better. Metal Gear Solid Syndrome, I know. First, the elephant in the room, the Temple of the Ocean King. I actually don't mind it at all, and it doesn't affect my rating for Phantom Hourglass. Why? This is because I'm an achievement hunter. With achievements, you usually have to do stuff over and over through trial and error to earn them, so I'm extremely used to repeating tasks in video games. Now, I mentioned sailing not being my thing in Wind Waker, but here in Phantom Hourglass, I like it a little bit more, but it's still boring. I think it's because the other DS screen holds details for me to look at while traveling, and there is a fair amount of obstacles and enemies who get in your way. The unpopular opinion here is that I like Phantom Hourglass's overworld over Wind Waker's. I'm not a fan of Linebeck. I understand his character development for others, I really do, but I met a lot of people like him in real life, so no, I don't like his constant narcissism. It's really annoying. Besides, I'm a peacemaker, so yeah, everyone has their types of personalities that aren't their favorites. I'll bet you $100 that someone will eventually write a comment about how often I say, in my opinion, in this video. See? There you go. No, I don't agree that Phantom Hourglass should be casually spat on by Zelda players. Of course, Zelda players have their legitimate reasons, nostalgic connections to Wind Waker sailing, the Temple of the Ocean King, or for some other reason. Hey, you have a right to your opinion and I respect it. I don't know, maybe I feel this game is overhated, but that's just me. Here's the number one reason I love Phantom Hourglass more than the usual Zelda player. I adore my Nintendo DS and playing the game with the stylus, and in my opinion, it works really well for the execution it was going for. It's a total immersion soaker. Now it's time to address this. Why doesn't the traveling in Spirit Tracks bother me in the slightest? In fact, I find it really fun. This is because of a few solid reasons. 1, I disagree with Zelda players, and I think there is enough scenery to enjoy. 2, the constant uprising of enemies keeps me alert. 3, trains are my favorite vehicle in the series. And 4, I'm a novel writer, so I have a higher tolerance in waiting. Now there's one common criticism I don't take seriously. When Zelda players mock the game for having trains in it. Now if you want to criticize the long travel times and lack of exploration, that's fine, but don't stop at because there's trains. It's another vehicle like the Zelda series always does. Should I mock Ocarina of Time and call it a bad game because there's horses? No, in my opinion, it's a silly popular criticism. I talked about the cell shading earlier from Wind Waker. No offense, but the cell shading looks 100 times better on the Nintendo DS because it suits it on handheld devices rather than on the big gaming consoles. Oh gee, here comes a comment. Scroll down. I bet it will be in all caps and exclamation points. Chancellor Cole is probably the ugliest looking character in the Zelda series. I don't know, he just looks like a leprechaun that looks like he got by a Santa Claus elf and Muppet and then got along with. I don't know if this is popular or not, but if no one talks about it, I'm assuming I'm one of the few that thinks this. This one will burn. I don't think Zelda is a great character from the series. I don't know, she either unintentionally helps the enemy like in Ocarina of Time, not in a Zelda game like Link's Awakening, or captured. In my opinion, the Spirit Tracks Zelda is the only Zelda character that I thoroughly enjoy from the series, with Minishcap in second place though. I'm not a fan of Zelda, Groose, or Giri. I'm going to lay it to you flat. It's because they remind me of some lame anime cliches. I'm an anime fan. Sure, I'll give you some examples with Zelda. 1. Hands on hips, and the way she talks here reminds me of some lame tsundere girls I know in anime. You know, the appointed bossy girl in high school anime that beats up the guys she perceives as perverts? Very annoying cliche in anime. 2. Zelda pushes Link off high places. Twice. Sometimes anime writers write girls doing random cute things or fan service and expect readers to get hooked in just because of it, like the cliche of bathhouses for example. Now, I know the writers didn't mean this with Zelda, but it's annoying because it reminds me of that anime cliche gone wrong. 3. One more example. What the hell is this random worry outburst of Link passing the trial? Being a novel writer, this stumps me. If this showed up more consistently or for a secret plot twist, it would work. But you can't have characters that become another character this one time. It's called a moment of inconsistent and lazy writing. Shock value doesn't give it a pass either. The Silent Realms are my favorite parts of Skyward Sword, partly because you don't have to use your sword from the motion controls because they tire out my hand. I love the beautiful aesthetics, the music, and I like stealth games. Besides, I like exploration in small areas in Zelda, so bring it. I'm not a fan of the Ancient Cistern. A large part of this is because I'm not a fan of museums or studying other cultures, and this place so consciously rubs off on me as being too artsy-fartsy to me to be taken seriously as a dungeon. Sorry, but I hated art and culture history in school, and this just screams both. If you like it, cool. I'm not into it. I actually like the Imprisoned, like a lot, that it's in my top 10 favorite Zelda bosses. 2 reasons. 1, it's a breath of fresh air of Zelda bosses being so easy, so yes, bring it. Make things hard for me for once. Challenge me. And 2, I have a Dark Souls mentality, so I want bosses to be as brutally unfair to me as possible. Proud of it. I actually don't mind that Skyward Sword repeats its messages with the rupees and recollecting materials. I know it's a commonly complained about concept, but maybe I don't mind it because I'm desensitized to the iron boots from the water temple. Is it because I played a few games that have done this? I don't know, but it doesn't bother me. Link Between Worlds has a nasty habit with me fluctuating between being fun or being boring. I think this is because I play action games regularly, so when I play this game it feels like it's trying to impress me with the faster frame rate, but it comes off to me as a watered down action game. So when I get bored, I put down this game and play faster games like Mario instead. I don't think the faster frame rate works in an adventure game like this. These dungeons give me the most mixed feelings out of every Zelda game. There's some I enjoy like Turtle Rock, Dark Palace, and Swamp Palace, ones that bore me like the Skullwoods and Eastern Palace, ones that are too streamlined like Desert Palace and Thieves Hideout, and ones I'm not a fan of like Ice Ruins and Lorule Castle. It's a little disorienting to be honest how I feel about them overall. Link Between Worlds is the easiest Zelda game to date in my opinion. It's fine if a Zelda game wants to do this because it's a kid's game, but my personal preferences with video games will cause me to get bored with something if it gets too easy. This is the main reason I enjoy A Link to the Past a lot more than this title. Other Zelda players enjoy Link's added versatility and power, but to me being all powerful means no obstacles to overcome. The overworld is not appealing, and I think this is because it reflects A Link to the Past too closely for my taste. I said in the countdown that remakes are not my thing, and yes, I know this game isn't a remake, but the overworld is so darn similar to A Link to the Past that I don't feel like I'm exploring a new world, and it's honestly jarring. It's disappointing because I like Zelda for their different and diverse worlds. You know, it's funny, I thought that after I desensitized myself from the graphics with Triforce Heroes, I thought I would have a complete 180 about this game and finally like it. I don't. Sorry, but I'll never be a true fan of Link Between Worlds. I don't hate the game anymore like I used to, but it's easily the most boring game for me out of this series. Despite the padding, this is actually my favorite thing from Triforce Heroes because of my achievement highs I get from my video games. Sounds like fun to contribute to a checklist and 100% this game. Looking forward to it. I prepare for the worst case scenario in Triforce Heroes. I've been burned like every other Zelda player. I wear dresses that emphasize hearts to keep the party alive, get the leftover item to keep the players happy, get their trust, and try to get to the bottom of the tower in a stack of 3 because you get those Zelda players that move the tower poorly. Let's say I stay prepared for those unfavorable experiences. I think getting rid of the 4th link is definitely for the best. Being a former computer programmer in college for 3 years, I can definitely see where you've got to sacrifice things to boost other aspects like performance. We live in a generation of gaming where 30 frames per second will get you crucified with the high demands we have for gaming nowadays by the public and the sales. Smart move. This will be fun, but I actually like AI in video games. I find them kind of fascinating. So I wish they went for an option to substitute your partners with AI instead of turning them into lifeless statues in single player. But I can understand this. The task you'd have to assign to them is too specific. Shame, but a guy can dream, right? If you play the game after midnight, you sometimes come across Zelda players who want to goof around and play rather than do the courses. One time I got into a major playful King of the Hill battle with a piece of the course, and another time we found a glitch. Sometimes the funnest parts of the game is not playing the game at all, but having creative fun with players. This does not smooth over well with more serious players. I said earlier on the popular opinions list that the series being kid-friendly is its biggest advantage, but I also believe that this is its biggest disadvantage too for why some aren't into the series. Easy bosses, easy dungeons, easy items to use, and easy combat plague this series. It's very different from game to game, which is appealing, but I would call this series easygoing compared to other series in how it executes itself. Despite that I'm a Zelda fan, I don't enjoy treating the series like a competition. This is because I'm not a competitive person. I don't like that, oh, Twilight Princess is better than Majora's Mask, or this dungeon is better than this dungeon talk. I'm more about that they're all consistently good games and leave it at that, because they aren't buggy or have any technical issues. I don't mind comparing, but I do mind competing. I am not interested in Breath of the Wild and never have been. I'm cautiously optimistic and will give it a proper try because don't judge it before you play it, but the reason I'm doubtful is because I'm not a fan of huge sprawling wildlife worlds like Skyrim or Minecraft. I don't think it'll reach my top 5, but maybe my top 10? Don't know. I'm not feeling confident. No, I don't believe in that 3D Zelda games are automatically better than 2D Zelda games because of graphics mindset that a lot of Zelda players share. I grew up with both the 2D and 3D Zelda games and have grown fond of all of them on release and even today. I grew up with the Sega Genesis. I'm a gameplay over graphics guy. Graphics is certainly one piece of the puzzle in me judging a game, but it doesn't cost me to give out free passes to the 3D games. And finally, Zelda is not in my top 10 favorite video game series of all time. It's nothing personal, I just happen to like action, violence, and gun games a lot more. Does this mean I'm not a Zelda fan? Of course not. I enjoy talking about Zelda because it's a personal interpretation thing that other series can't compete with. But I will admit that Zelda is something I'm more of a casual fan with rather than being a hardcore fan of. Dun dun dun! What are some of your unpopular opinions?